Most women don't leave corporate because they hate working hard. They leave because they are so tired of building somebody else's machine. But if you're not careful, your advisory practice becomes the same job with no salary, no title, and no off switch. I've helped hundreds of mid-career experts avoid this exact trap. And there's one decision that separates those who build an actual practice from those who slowly burn out building somebody else's business for the second time. So in this video, I'm going to show you the moment that trap is set, what an advisory practice actually looks like when you start it out the right way, and the one question that you're going to want to answer before you take on your first client. And if you've been struggling with where to even get started, don't wait until you've got 3 messy clients and a calendar full of work that you don't actually want. So before you take that first client, grab my free niche finder. It's just 5 questions that'll help you see where your advisory practice should start and what type of work to stop chasing. The link's below. I recommend you check it out. And now let's dive in. So when many people begin a business and they're leaving corporate or another role, it often starts out the same way. Someone in your network says, "Hey, I've been really meaning to call you. I really need help with X." And 15 or 20 years of being needed wakes up. You feel so useful. You feel so wanted. You say yes, not out of desperation, but really because you are helpful and you're generous and you're really good at X. You've done X for many, many years. And that yes is the moment that the trap is set, not because the people that you're helping don't deserve help, but because of what saying yes to doing X signals about who you are in this relationship. So let's talk about why the trap. So what's going on with the trap? So the first thing is that 20 years of corporate has wired you to believe that your value equals what you produce. So saying yes feels like adding value. Saying, "Let me think about this and get back to you," feels like dodging. So the first issue in the trap is that we feel like the value of what we do is what I produce, because that's what we've been conditioned to think. The second reason why we end up in this trap is that implementation feels safe. The reason why it feels safe, it's because that's how you've been rewarded for the work that you've been doing for however many years that you've been excellent at X. The thing about implementation is it feels like you're doing something really worthwhile. It feels like you are going to be helpful to them. It feels like you're adding value. And then the other reason why people often experience this trap is they think that advising isn't enough. So if you're just guiding, if you're just advising, if you're not doing the heavy lifting, if you're not getting in there and getting your hands dirty, are you even adding value? Is that enough? And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So inside of this trap, there is a rub, and that rub is the identity versus discomfort. So when we think about that identity of who we are, how we've been helpful, the ways in which we've maybe been over functioning or overproducing in former roles, that becomes our identity, right? Versus the discomfort of saying, "You know what? Moving forward, I actually really want to work differently, because for the first half of my career, I was feeling so exhausted and so burnt out. And I've earned the place that I'm at today where I can just guide and advise and help other businesses without being the one doing all the doing." But without bringing these thoughts to the surface, value is what I produce, implementation feels safe, or advising isn't enough, without really thinking about that first, we automatically default into that doing role. But that doing role is a huge trap, which I'll chat about in a few minutes. But what I want you to do is just think about this analogy. Let's say that you're on the runway of an airport, you're going on vacation, and you're so excited about it. And you'll take a look at the pilot. The pilot seems to know what they're doing. You feel comforted because you're with your family and airline safety is pretty important to you. But then you look out to the air traffic controller and you see that they are completely under control. They are guiding the plane. They aren't the ones flying the plane, but they're the ones making sure that everybody stays safe. That's essentially your role. You do not need to be the pilot in order to get everybody to their destination. In fact, the most important role, this could be argued depending on who you talk to, is the person who's the air traffic controller. They're the ones setting the strategy. They're the ones making sure that the plane doesn't go in the wrong direction. And without them being in their seat, everything could go sideways. Think about that from a business perspective. Who is the air traffic controller in a business? Many times it needs to be an advisor who's outside of everything that's happening. And that's the opportunity for you to be able to come in and guide. So when we first start working with clients, or if you're ready to make a shift in how you're working with clients, you have a decision to make. And that decision is how you are going to work. And there's two different ways that you can work. You can do the work. And if you're doing the work, what's going to happen is that you are likely going to end up very much capped. A lot of times people will start doing the work and they'll start charging hourly. Or what will happen is that they will start creating all of this huge role for themselves because of that identity shift they had not yet done. And so in doing the work, they end up just building themselves another job just with multiple bosses. But if you end up pricing for your thinking, so you end up advising, what happens here is that you're pointing out to the client the things that they can't see from their vantage point. You, as that air traffic controller, are guiding the strategy. You're helping them figure out what their next best step is. And that offer in itself is very much time leveraged. So you could have the same exact skill set. So you have the same exact skills, but with two different offers. And what's really interesting about these two different offers is that one is what I call a vitamin. So if you're doing the work, if you're the one making things happen, if you're coming in and your primary offer is, I just get everything done, that's what I call a vitamin offer. It's something that's nice to have, but it's easy to put off until later. Or it's easy to say, well, that sounds great, but maybe I'll get it done. Maybe I won't. It's not really solving the biggest pain point in our business right now. Versus advising is a painkiller. If you've ever had the unfortunate decision of having to bring one of your children to the hospital, like I have, many of us have been in that situation, and you look at them and you think, that hand, when you bend it that way after that play that you just made on the baseball field, doesn't quite look right. We need to get it checked out. You're not thinking, well, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. Maybe next quarter, we'll see what happens. You know that your child is in pain and it needs to get resolved immediately. So you're rushing off to the ER or to the doctor to ensure that it's not something that is going to be permanent damage to their bodies. It's the same exact thing with business. When people have a painkiller offer, that's when it's less likely they're going to get into the trap of doing the work and more likely that they're going to be in a position of advising. So you always want to make sure that your offer is what I call a painkiller, something that resolves the biggest issue that the business has right now and today. So when you first get started, again, there's really two paths that you can follow. One is the doer path. It feels a little bit more comfortable in the beginning and a little bit more safe. You're doing the work. But if you intentionally choose the advisor path, you're guiding the strategy only. When you're a doer, you're often charging by the hour, so hourly rates, because you're essentially just becoming an employee on a limited basis within that company. But when you're an advisor, you're charging for your thinking. You're charging for the output. You're charging for the outcome of that painkiller offer. When you're a doer, you are capped by time. So when you're a doer, you can only take on a small number of clients at a time, because if you're doing all the heavy lifting within a company, it's very easy to slip into a 15 or 20 or 30-hour a week role within that organization. When you're an advisor, you can deliver it in a time leveraged way. When you're an advisor and you're advising to outcomes, that's when your thinking becomes the most impactful aspect of your delivery. And when you're a doer, you've really rebuilt your corporate job. That's when a lot of people end up leaving their job and ending up feeling more trapped than ever. When you're an advisor, this is where you can build a freedom first business. Ultimately, within these two paths, the doer versus the advisor, the doer is often the default role that a lot of people fall into. And the reason is because it feels safer. It feels more comfortable. It feels more like what you've been doing in the past. Whereas when you are working towards becoming an advisor, this is ultimately what you came for. Being an advisor is what you came for. It's what you wanted when you started this business, when you left your corporate role, when you dreamed of being an entrepreneur. And the advisor gives you so much more opportunity to grow and expand because it doesn't take up all of your capacity and it utilizes utilizes the most important asset that you bring to the table, which is your brain. So let's talk about the result, the difference between following the doer path versus the advisor path result. So the doer path, you end up very much boxed in. You can probably take about 3 clients. They're going to be about 20 hours a week. And you're going to be working 60 hours a week, totally maxed out, without the safety, security, and benefits that come with having a job. When you're an advisor, you can take 6 to 8 clients at a time because all you're doing is advising and guiding in between the meetings. That means that you're working about 2 to 3 hours a week per client, which equals about 15 to 20 hours a week total. So if we look at that doer role, it completely caps your time. If we look at the advisor role, it gives you room to grow, room to develop other revenue streams, room for you to be able to take on different projects. It gives you the ability to start here, maybe 10 to 30K a month, but then it gives you the ability to expand and grow to 30K plus a month, or if you want, all the way to 7 figures, which was my exact path. When you build it the advisor way, this is when you're going to be able to have those slow mornings. This is when you're going to be able to have time for hobbies and be able to do all of the things that you intended to do when you first started your business. So as you can see, there's one decision that you need to make even before you have the first conversation. Every engagement, every client you sign is downstream of one question, and you're going to want to answer it before you even speak to your first client, and sometimes before you know that you're even answering it. You answer it the moment you decide what to charge, the moment that you write your offer, the moment that you reply to that first email. Because the people who build 4 client practices working 15 hours a week answer this question before the first conversation, not midway through year 2 when they're already burnt out and thinking about going back to corporate. And the question is, am I being hired to do the work, or am I being hired to see what they can't? And once you answer it, 3 things change immediately. First, how you even describe what it is that you do. You stop describing the service and you start describing the pain that your offer eliminates. You also make a decision about what to charge. You stop billing for the hours and you start pricing for your thinking. And then also who you say yes to. You decline implementation only requests, or you reframe them to put it in the client's best interest for you to guide the team, but not come in and take over. So if you've been listening so far and you've been thinking, this makes a lot of sense to me, but what happens after I start advising? What type of business can I build? And what's possible for me? I recommend you check out my 7-figure roadmap. I'll link it in this next video and I'll see you over there.